Shalom, beloveds of the King. Praise Abba Yahuwah. Here we are today, and we are continuing to look at our Torah portions and how powerful these Torah portions are just coming forth in the hour that we find ourselves in. And with every Torah portion, it is important that we open up our spiritual eyes and open up our spiritual ears to hear what it is that the Father is trying to say to us in the hour that we find ourselves in, because these are the very things that are going to present themselves. These are the very things that if we think that this was only for the children of Israel, we are very mistaken, because the very same issues that they faced is the very same trials and the very same tests that we are going to face. And especially in the days ahead, as we are going to move into places of where Father is going to be able to start setting people apart, and the Father is raising up people and He's starting to do His work, and there will be camps, and in the camps there are going to be people, because this is the time that we're going to go to in the time ahead of us as we are going into darker days. Father has got places of refuge. Father has got places set apart unto Him, where He is wanting to be able to do His work, and where He has set places apart unto Himself for places of refuge. And we need to understand that the same situations that presented themselves in the time of the Israelites in their camp will present itself in the time that we will move forward. And whether it be in ministries, whether it be in churches, we see these same things presenting themselves already in the church, in ministries, in congregations, in fellowships. We see these same issues. They still present themselves today. Nothing has changed. There's nothing new under the sun, is what it says in Ecclesiastes. And this is exactly what we see that still happens today. So let us pray before we get into this Torah portion of Korach. Abba Yahuwah, I just want to praise you, and I just want to thank you. I thank you for that which you are doing in the hour that we find ourselves in. I thank you for the message that you are speaking, Father, that we are to understand that we are to be a submitted and a surrendered vessel. Father, you have your way. We are merely your hands and your feet extended. And you are the one who raises up leaders. You bring down leaders. You are the one who chooses. Man is not the one who chooses, but you choose. But many times our own attitudes, our own jealousies, just like Cain that was jealous over Abel, brings much destruction, many times in a camp. And it's only because of our unmet needs. It's only because of our hearts, hardness of hearts, and our own insecurities, and our own unresolved issues within our hearts that causes the problems that are there. And instead of us embracing what you're doing, knowing that we are all building for your kingdom, no. Instead, we come and we fight one another, and we stand against one another. And how sad it is, my Father, when we see that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And yet this is exactly what the enemy's plan is. The enemy's plan is to come and kill, steal, and destroy. The enemy's plan has always been to bring division. Because where there is division, then you cannot command a blessing, because of the division that is there. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just pray that we would really come to the place of humility, understanding that you are the one that does what needs to be done. You are the one that has a plan. And if we would all just understand to be able to surrender and bow our knee and seek your face and allow you to do things the way you are doing it, then everything will plan out as it's supposed to, and everything will be according to your purpose, according to your plan. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I pray that you really come and give us a powerful message in this message of Korach, a message that really we need to understand in the time that we are in, because these things present themselves at all times, but what is the attitude of our hearts in the time of when it presents itself? And so, Abba, I just want to come. I want to just submit myself to you right now. Ask you, Father, will you come and speak to my mind, speak through my lips, the very oracles that come from your heart, my Father. I thank you, Father, that you teach us much through these Torah portions. I thank you that we have these Torah portions in order to be a time, a guiding light, because your word is a light unto our feet. And your word brings clarity in so many different ways, so that we may understand that you are the same yesterday, today, and forever. You do not change. And truly, the Torah is there as a foundation for us in order to learn from what has already been written and what was already being played out in the time with the Israelites, so that we that go about our lives do not make the same mistakes. So thank you, Father, for your examples that you have given us in your Torah. I praise and I thank you as I commit this time to you now, in Yeshua's name. Amen. And so we are looking at Torah portion number 38, and we are looking at Korach. And Korach is Torah portion from Numbers 16:1 to Numbers 18:32. And the Haftorah is 1 Samuel 11:14 to 12:22. And this is a Torah portion really looking at the fact that Father is the one who raises up leaders. Father is the one who puts leaders in the place of what he puts them in. And at the end of the day, those leaders are responsible to the Father, because they know that they did not choose themselves. They know that the Father is the one that has raised them up. And they stand accountable before the Father on behalf of those people that the Father is asking them to lead. And at the end of the day, all they can do is come before the Father, present the people before the Father, pray on behalf of the people before the Father, teach the people the way that they are to go. But at the end of the day, the people have their own decisions and their own minds to make the decision that they have to make. Because people in this day and age are free. Free to serve, free to go, free to do what they want to do. And YouTube is full of a lot of self-appointed leaders, self-made leaders that the Father did not choose, but that have chosen themselves, raised themselves up, and now they can teach, they can preach. But there are those that the Father has anointed, that the Father has appointed, that the Father has specifically called. I read something this morning that said, let's just see if we take away the paycheck, the money that's been given to some of these leaders, some of these preachers and pastors and evangelists and teachers and prophets, and let's see if they will still be called, if they would still be doing what they're doing. Because how many of them, it's either for the fame or for the fortune that they have raised up. And so we are going to look at this Korach story, which at the end of the day is quite a sad story in the end. Sad. When rebellion comes into a camp, how it's going to affect everything in that camp. And it brings the plague on the camp because of rebellion. And people died because of the rebellion. And you will see that there is rebellion in a camp when you will start to see that there is a plague, there is destruction, there is not blessing, but instead destruction. So we are reading from Numbers chapter 16. And Korach, son of Yitzhar, son of Kehath, son of Levi, took both Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben. Now it's interesting how Korach means to make bold. To be bold, it means boldness. So at the end of the day, your rebellion will bring boldness, and it's going to bring shame on you at the end of the day, as you will be laying bare. And so look at the fact of where your rebellion will bring boldness, strip you of your covering, where you are supposed to be having a covering. You will be stripped of that covering, and you will be bold. You will have boldness. And at the end of the day, Korach had a covering. But because he wanted to raise himself up and he wanted to be in rebellion, he was laid waste. He was bold. He laid bare. And that's what we need to understand from what the Father is trying to show us, because rebellion makes you stand on your own, and you will be without a covering, because you will be bold. Because what is the hair there? It's part of your covering, and you will be bold with no covering. So in Numbers chapter 16 verse 2, and it says, and they rose up before Moshe with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, called ones of the meeting, men of name. So understand, these are not men that were not known. They're men of name. So understand, they are men of name, which means they themselves are raised up to be leaders, that the Father has also called them in order to lead. And they have their role to play. And this is what we've got to understand. Father is the one who puts the things in place. And so even if there is a ministry, for example, or there is a church, or whatever the setting is, I don't like to go into church settings too much, but even if there is a fellowship, each one has their place, each one has their role. But you see, there comes a problem when somebody is jealous of another person's position, and they are wanting what the other person has, and yet that is not their position, that is not their call, and yet that is what they want. And this is exactly what has happened with Korach. And it's all because of what? Because of jealousies. And these are the things that happen within fellowships, because it lands up being jealousies. And instead of us being able to understand that each one of us has got a different call, and each one of us has got a place in what we're supposed to do, no. What happens? The people fight the leaders. And this is what happens. Because why? They want the position of the leader. They don't want to do what they're called to do. And this is exactly the lesson that we need to hear from Korach. Because people think that they can rub them up with other people and then take over from what they are doing, or who they are, or they don't want to submit, or whatever the case may be. And there is always a danger in that. There is always a danger in the fact of where we need to be able to go with the path that the Father has laid for us, and understand that the Father puts people in positions, and it's not man that is going to speak up against the position that the Father's put, because it's the Father's choice. So we continue to read, and it says, and they assembled against Moshe and against Aaron, and said to them, enough of you, for all the congregation is set apart. Now you see, that's what people do today. We are all anointed. We are all called. Who are you to have raised yourself up? And what they don't understand is that Father is the one who raises the people up. Father is the one who does what needs to be done. So enough of you, for all the congregation is set apart, all of them, and Yahuwah is in their midst. Why then do you lift yourselves up? Do you lift up yourselves above the assembly of Yahuwah? So yeah, you see, now, Father is the one who chose Moses. Father is the one who put Moses to stand before the Pharaoh. Moses and Aaron were the ones taking the brunt of the battle when the battle was on, because the Father knows who He chooses to stand in the battleground. He knows how He's equipped you. He's equipped each person. From childhood, you have been equipped in order to do the work that He's got for you to do. And this is what He knows for you to do. But yet at the end of the day, what do people do? People will then all of a sudden come and stand and say, why do you lift yourself up? Why do you all of a sudden think that you are our leader? But the Father is the one who knows who stands in the gap for the people. Was it not Moses? Was it not Aaron that were the ones that had to do, that were equipped by the Father to stand before the Pharaoh? Did the Father not equip Moses 40 years in the wilderness in order to equip him to lead the people out of Mitzrayim? But now, here comes Korach saying, who are you? Who are you and Aaron that think that you should be our leaders? We all are called. We are all set apart. 250 of them. And when Moshe heard, he fell on his face. And this is the heart of a true leader. The heart of a true leader just falls on their face, repents before the Father, because they know that they themselves didn't even call themselves. What did Moses say? Why do you choose me? Moses didn't arrogantly stand before the Father and say, well, here I am. I'm the one who wants to be the leader. Let me go and do what needs to be done. No, as a matter of fact, every true leader that the Father really chooses, most of the times they are on their face and saying, oh my goodness, Father, why do you choose me? I'm sure there's somebody better equipped than me. They are not arrogantly standing before the Father and saying, well, look at me. I'm so gifted. I'm so anointed. Why don't you choose me? No, as a matter of fact, most of them are the ones that come before the Father and say, I am the last person that you should be choosing. Because why? Father chooses the ones that He needs to choose, because at the end of the day, He knows the heart. And so Moshe falls on his face because he knows destruction is going to come. And spoke to Korach, all his companions, saying, tomorrow morning Yahuwah shall make known who is His and who is set apart, and bring him near to Him, and let him bring near to Him the one whom He chooses. So you've got to understand, I have been saying, and I will continue to say, there is a priesthood that has fallen, and there is a changing of the guard. There is a new priesthood raising up. And the Father is the one who knows the priesthood whom He has chosen. He's the one who's handpicked. He's the one who has chosen. It's not man that has chosen. He chooses His priesthood because He knows the hearts. He knows that their hearts is not filled with wickedness. He knows that their hearts is not filled with malice. And He knows that their hearts is filled with His presence. And so man can want to raise themselves up. And so here we see that there will always be a group of people that will raise themselves up and say, but we also hear the Father. We are also anointed. We can also hear from the Father. And this is the sad thing that brings so many splits in ministries, in churches, even when there is a group of people that there is a work to be done. Or we have seen ourselves, even when we have gone on tour, there will be those that will raise up to want to bring destruction amongst those that will be there. Because why? The enemy will always have one that's got to raise up. Remember, one bad apple, what does it do? One rotten apple, one person that still has issues within themselves, what does that one person want to do? Bring destruction. Bring the contamination of its rottenness to the rest of the group. Because why? Because that one has a rebellious attitude, a rebellious heart that doesn't want to submit and surrender to the leadership that is there. And at the end of the day, Yahuwah did not raise them. People will want to raise themselves up for things that Yahuwah did not raise them up for. He's the one who chooses leaders. He has chosen them to do a work because he chooses them to work through them. And that's why in verse 4 we see true humility of Moses, who goes on his knees and he repents on behalf of these people. Because all he can do is repent, because he knows that destruction is going to come. And so by verse 5, we see that there is a separation coming from those that are truly his, from those that are not. Those that are truly set apart. To be set apart means kadosh. And this is the root word H6942 from kadash. And that means to consecrate, to sanctify, to dedicate, to be holy, to be sanctified, to be separated, to keep oneself apart, to be clean, to purify, to sanctify oneself. And they will know one that is set apart and one that whom he chooses. So to be chosen is the word brachar, H977. To choose, to elect, to be chosen, to be selected, acceptable, appointed, chosen, to join. And then that's chosen, the chosen, and to come near. To enter in, to bring forth, to cause, to draw near, to make ready, to present, to offer. And so he's going to say to come near to him, to present themselves to him, to bring forth, to make ready, to present, to offer. And then verse 7 says, and put fire in them, and put incense in them before Yahuwah tomorrow. And it shall be that one whom Yahuwah chooses is set apart one. Enough of you, sons of Levi. So Moses is going to say, right, we are going to see now who are the chosen ones and who are not. And let me tell you, in these last days that we are going into now, you are going to see who are the ones that are raising themselves up and who are the ones that are truly the sons of Yahuwah that are set apart. There will be a set apartness that's going to take place. Father is going to work through those that are his, because he knows those that carry his heart. He knows those that are truly humble from those that are not, from those that have arrogance and pride in their hearts because they are not submitted to the Father. And so there's going to be a separation from those that are the true worshippers from those that are not. There will be a distinction from a false worshipper to the true worshipper. And those will be his true priesthoods. That will be his true priests. Because like I said, right now, the false is going to fall. And so it's very difficult because right now the Father is bringing a separation. And people have choices to make. And they're either going to submit and surrender to what the Father is doing, or they are excluding themselves at the end of the day. But the Father is not going to stand back and be able to not do what he's going to do because of a bunch of people. The Father will eliminate. The Father will uproot. The Father will remove, just like he did with Korach. They were given duties. They were given an opportunity. They were called to be able to serve in his temple. They had duties that they needed to follow. But they were the ones that made the decision to say, well, I don't want to submit to this leadership. I want to do what the other one is doing, because this is not what I want to do. So they become raised up in their own thing. And so we read then from verses 8, and we are just going to read the rest of this chapter and see what happens. And Moshe said to Korach, hear now, you sons of Levi, is it little to you that Alu of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel? So understand, they were already a set-apart people. Father had already separated them from those that were of the congregation of Israel. And they were called to have to serve already in his kingdom. And has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to perform the service of the dwelling place of Yahuwah, and to stand before the congregation to serve them. So they were already set apart by the Father, that to draw near to him. They were called to serve in his tabernacle. They were called to serve in his dwelling place. And they were called to serve the people. And that he had brought you near to himself, you and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. Yet you seek the priesthood as well. So they were not happy with their position. No, they wanted to be in charge. They wanted the priesthood. They wanted to be the main leader. Therefore, you and all your company are set against Yahuwah. And Aaron, what is he that you grumble against him? And Moshe sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. But they said, we are not coming up. So now Moses calls for them, and they are not wanting to come. So you see the rebellion in the heart. Is it little that you have brought us up out of the land of flowing? So you see, then they moan, they gripe, they complain. These people have a critical attitude. They criticize everything. And they constantly are criticizing and complaining. They always see the bad as opposed to see the good. Is it little that you brought us up out of the land of flowing with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness, that you would also seize total rule over us? And now it's like the Father has placed you as the one who needs to lead, but you don't want to submit to that leadership. Because I am my own person. Why should I submit under you? So you don't want to be in submission. Also, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Would you bore out the eyes of these men? We are not coming up. And Moshe became very displeased and said to Yahuwah, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I done any harm to any of them. And this is the problem. The people will stand up against those that the Father has placed there to do a work. And that's all they're trying to do, is do the work that the Father has called them to do. But yet, they're not there to do them any harm. They're there to intercede, to pray for them, and to include them, and let them be part of what the Father is doing. But yet, what do? They don't do them any harm, yet they rebel against them and speak up against them. And the worst is, they don't confront them. They speak behind their back. They do things behind their back. That's what's the worst. Then Moshe said to Korach, so you see, Korach went and gathered 250 men behind Moses' back, behind Aaron's back. He was already a mighty leader raising up, doing his own thing. Then Moshe said to Korach, tomorrow you and all your company shall be there before Yahuwah, you and they and Aaron, and each one his fire holder, and shall put incense in it, and let each one bring his fire holder before Yahuwah, 250 fire holders, and you and Aaron, each one with his fire holder. So each one took his fire holder and put fire in it and laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tent of appointment with Moshe and Aaron. Now understand, it was only given to the priests in order to do this. It was not given to the Levites. The Levites were not supposed to be the ones bringing the incense before the Father. Now, should it not have already been a lesson to them that what happened to the sons of, to Abihu, Nadab and Abihu, that died because they offered strange fire. But Korach, who's now not even a priest, doesn't learn from what has already been done. There's no fear of Yahuwah, because they saw how Abihu and Nadab in Numbers chapter 10 they died. Why? Because of the fact that they came and they offered strange fire to the Father. In Leviticus chapter 10. When we see Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his fire holder and put fire in it, and put incense on it, and brought strange fire before Yahuwah, which he had not commanded them. And what happened to them? They died. But now comes the sons of Levi that are not supposed to bring fire before the Father. They're not supposed to bring the incense. So understand, it's not that there's already not been an example. There's been an example already. And they have not learned from the example. And now, what do you think is going to happen to them when they too are going to bring strange fire before the Father that they were not commanded to do? So this should have been a lesson for them from what they've already learned, to say, oh, we better not bring strange fire before the Father. But you see, in their arrogance and in their pride, because there's rebellion in their hearts, they are setting themselves up to be destroyed. And Korach assembled all the congregation against them at the door of the tent of appointment. Then the esteem of Yahuwah appeared to all the congregation, and Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and said to Aaron, saying, now you see, when there is one that raises themselves up in rebellion, the best thing that one can do, separate yourself from them. So if there is a camp and there is someone that's going to raise themselves up in rebellion against the Father and the leadership, the best thing that you can do is do not get involved in the rebellion, or else you will be separated with them and destroyed with them, because a little leaven leavens the whole lump. And if you don't set yourself apart and you open your ears to listen to the evil of what's going to come, you will be brought into the destruction with those people. And I will give a testimony of what happened, of what I saw happen personally myself when I was in Congo, in Cameroon. Separate yourselves from the midst of this congregation and let me consume them in a moment. But they fell on their faces and said, O El Allure of the spirits of all flesh, when one man sins, are you wroth with all the congregation? So understand, when there is evil in a camp, You are to separate yourselves from that evil, because the Father is going to bring judgment. He will judge. He will not allow rebellion to carry on without a judgment. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, move away from around the tents of Korach, Dathan, and Abiram. So Moshe rose up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, please turn away from the tents of these wrong men. Do not touch whatever belongs to them, lest you be consumed in all their sins. So you see, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. So when there starts to come up one in a place that starts to speak up against the leadership, separate yourself from that, or else that leaven will contaminate you. And that is what I have seen happen, how people then disqualify themselves because they have partaken of that sin. Then they moved away from around the tents of Korach, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan, Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents, and their wives and their sons and their little children. And Moshe said, by this you know that Yahuwah has sent me to do all these works, that they are not from my own heart. And so understand, there are people doing a lot of good works, and they think that they stand so right before the Father, but they don't. And these die as all men do. Or if they are not visited as all men are visited, then Yahuwah has not sent me. But if Yahuwah creates what is unheard of, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have scorned Yahuwah. And it came to be, as he ended speaking all these words, that the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the men, with Korach and all their goods. And they and all those with them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And all Israel who were around about them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up. And the fire came out from Yahuwah and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, say to Eleazar, son of Aaron, and the priest, to pick up the fire holders out of the blaze, and they set apart and scatter the fire some distance away. And the fire holders of these men, who sinned against their own lives, let them be made into beaten plates as a covering for the slaughter place, because they brought them before Yahuwah. Therefore they have set apart, and let them become a sign to the children of Israel. And Eleazar the priest took the bronze fire holders, which those who were burned up and had brought, and they were beaten, and as a covering on the slaughter place, a remembrance to the children of Israel, that no stranger who is not of the seed of Aaron should come near to offer incense before Yahuwah, not like Korach and his company. And Yahuwah had said to them through Moshe. Now, there was the one time I was at I'd gone to a conference with the Spiritual Warfare and Deliverance Ministry that I was with in Cameroon. And one of the ladies that was with me, what happened was, we were not able, our flights had been cancelled, and there was a lot of problems going on with Cameroon Airlines, and we were not able to travel. And there was a lady that was with me, Labon, and some of the other people from, that was with us, that came from South Africa, started to rebel and say, no, we want to go home, and we are not going to stay, and we need to boycott this and go and make a noise about this and everything. And I said to Labon, do not get involved. You are here. You came with the ministry, and we are to be in submission to the leadership We need to submit to Mama Olangi. And I mean, we are in a spiritual warfare and deliverance ministry. You don't play games. I mean, the enemy will take you out. And, you know, while she was with me on this tour, the Father even spoke to her and told her in a dream who I am, and she needs to listen to me. And she woke up that morning and she said, the Father told me your call. And he said to me who you are and that I'm to listen. And, you know, this is a very powerful ministry, one of the most powerful spiritual warfare and deliverance ministries in Africa, working with, major demonic things. And we are in this ministry, and we are in Cameroon, and we are under submission of Mama Olangi. But Laban constantly wanted to rebel, and all I wanted to do is I would say to her, the one time she wanted to go out, I said, we cannot go out. Mama Olangi said we are to stay in the hotel. We don't just go outside and go walk amongst these people. I said, say now something happens and we have been rebellious. And all I wanted to do was to submit to the leadership that was there, because I understood they are the ones that brought us there, and we are to be in submission to the authority that is there. And this is all I wanted to do, was be in submission to the authority, because I understand where there is a place, where I am in a place and there is authority, I am to submit under that authority. And this is what the Father has taught me. Now, if you do not learn to submit under the authority and the leadership that the Father has placed, that is in a place, you can never raise up to be a leader. You first need to learn to submit to authority before you yourself will be able to be raised up to be a leader. And this is what Father has taught me in my life. I have had to learn to submit under authority. Doesn't matter what authority is there. Doesn't matter whether I agree with the authority or not. I am to submit. Because that is the rules that the Father has placed in His Word. We might not agree with that, but we still, if we are in that place, and the Father has placed us there for a season, we are to submit. And so this is what I learned from the very first trip that I went on with Mama Olangi to Congo. I learned that I was to be in submission, because that was going to make the difference whether I was going to be protected or not, whether I was going to have a covering or not. And so from inception, it was like Laban just wanted to rebel. And that is why the Father had showed her that she was to listen. And I said, Laban, do not go and venture out on your own. And then when all of this happened within the group, then the South African people wanted to rebel, and eventually Laban decided to join that little crowd. And I said to Laban, do not do that. Stay with me and in the hotel where we are. No. And then she went with those South African people and started to, be rebellious. And I said to Laban, you are coming out from the covering that the Father has put you under. You have been graced to have to be under this covering. She didn't listen. And she started to go into destruction. Well, a day or two later, while she's in this whole rebellious place, the next thing, she gets word that her husband died. Her husband was taken out. And then she was devastated. And I said to Laban, you opened yourself up to destruction. That is what Mama Olangi said, that we are to be able to stay set apart. The Father knew that you were in a battle. You know why you came here, because you are in a battle. And now you opened yourself up. And it was a very difficult time of what she went through. And I mean, we were only supposed to have been in Cameroon for 2 weeks, but we landed up staying for 3 weeks because of the striking with the airlines. But you see, if we open ourselves up to destruction, you will have the destruction that's going to come your way, because you are in rebellion. And we don't always understand these things, but the Father understands them. And so in what we have read, we see how Abba is calling us to come out from among the rebellious. If we are in their camp, we will be judged with them. Korach was a talented Levite, set apart to serve Yahuwah. His position gave him prestige and respect. Yet he rebelled against the leadership that Abba had put in place. Many people raise themselves up because they seek power and authority beyond what Yahuwah has ordained. Abba calls leaders. We don't raise ourselves up. Korach was a gifted leader, and he had learned to be persuasive in his speaking. Why? Because he got others to join him. He had speaking abilities and was able to entice 250 leaders. And this is what happens, especially when there is a camp or when there is a group of people. There will be one that will raise up and will try and entice the others to be able to turn against the leadership. Yet, his desire for more than what Abba gave him brought how many people into destruction? It didn't just bring 250 people that died. In the end, it was 250 people plus 14,700. So almost 15,000 people died because of the rebellion of one man. Because in the end, they're going to die from the plague. We must remember that it is Yahuwah who places people in authority, and it is dangerous to oppose Yahuwah's anointed. Korach did just that in rebellion, and Abba removed him and his followers to keep the spiritual plague away from the rest of the nation. There are Yahuwah-appointed leaders, and there are self and man-appointed leaders. Self and man-appointed leaders. So what do self-appointed leaders do? They take upon themselves an authority and responsibility of a spiritual office which the Father has not given them. They are self-appointed leaders. These self-appointed leaders cause the people to do what? They cause others to raise up against existing leadership. So you will see. They cause the people to raise up against. So they break the people away from the place where the Father to say, well, you don't have to listen to that. Let's break away from the leadership that is there. They publicly criticize and question the existing leadership. They accuse the leadership of what they themselves are guilty of. They are not happy with the position that has been given to them, and they want more than what the Father has given. And they continue to murmur and complain and create a negative atmosphere. So they will create a negative atmosphere in a camp. But Yahuwah will reject false leadership. Abba puts Korach and those around him to death. And so some of them, they're not maybe going to go through a physical death, but the Father separates them from his purpose and from his plan. Yahuwah will reject false leadership. Abba put Korach and those around them to death. And this is the lesson that we need to learn. Because by what raises up, people will eventually become separated from that which the Father had ordained for their lives. They separate themselves because of what? Because they went and listened to Korach, a rebellious spirit that raised up against leadership. And remember, it's the Father that raises up leadership, because if we go look at John chapter 4, let's go to John chapter 4. (20 to 24). And it says, our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where we need to worship. Yahushua said to her, Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you shall neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, because the deliverance is of the Yodim. But the hour is coming, and now is, when true worshippers, her Father knows who his true worshippers are, shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father also does seek such to worship him. Eloah is spirit, and those who worship him need to worship him in spirit and in truth. So you see, Father has those that are filled with his Ruach HaKodesh. They are led by the Ruach HaKodesh, and they are led by the truth of his word. So his leaders, true leaders, are those following the Ruach. Wherever the Ruach goes, they know how to hear the Ruach and be moving by the Ruach, and they follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and they are led by the truth of the word. They have been tested, they have been tried by the Father, and they have proved faithful. And those are his true leaders. And so, in Ephesians 4, verse 11, let's go to Ephesians 4. So we are to understand that the Father is going to have those that are going to be able to worship him in spirit and in truth. And he chooses his leaders. And that's why if we go to Ephesians chapter 4. Now look at what it says in Ephesians chapter 4, because then we'd say, yes, but this was the Old Testament. It's not like that in the New Testament. Let's look at what he says in Ephesians chapter 4. He himself, Abba Yahuwah himself, gave some as emissaries, some as prophets. So he's the one who gave to the people. He raises up apostles, emissaries, prophets, some as evangelists, some as shepherds, some as teachers. For what reason does he raise them up? For the perfecting of the set-apart ones. So he raises up apostles, prophets, evangelists, teachers, pastors, shepherds. He raises them up. He anoints them. He appoints them. For what reason? For the perfecting of the set-apart ones, to the work of service, to the building up of the body of Messiah. So you see, they are there to equip the saints. They are there to do the work of the Father's ministry, until we all come to the unity of the belief and to the knowledge of the Son of Eloah, to a perfect man. But you see, instead, what do some of the people do that are not evangelists or prophets or teachers or apostles or whatever it is? They fight the ones that are raising up to be able to do the work, where they are trying to be able to bring a unity, where they are trying to be able to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, to bring us into a perfect man. But no, what do? Disunity. Measure of the stature of completeness of Messiah. So, to perfect man, to the measure of the stature of completeness of Messiah, so that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching. So you see, this is the problem, because people are set apart, set aside by every wind of teaching, by the trickery of men in cleverness, unto the craftiness of leading astray, but maintaining the truth in love. We grow up in all respect into him who is the head of Messiah. So do you see, why are we leading astray? Because at the end of the day, we are not in the completeness of Messiah. And so that we should no longer be children. You see, this is why we are not in unity and we fight one another, because you are still children. And what is the problem? You are led away by every wind of teaching, by the trickery of men, and by the craftiness of leading astray. And this is why then people will be led astray. Instead of maintaining the truth in love, where we are to stay in truth and love one another, but it's our doctrines of demons that will separate us, because it's religious spirits. The religious spirits are the worst spirits that bring the biggest division. from whom the entire body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the working by which each part does its share. So then each part will do its share, and causes growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. And this is what we're supposed to be doing. So you see, this is why the incense of Korach was not the right incense. Why? Because it came from a flesh that's not submitted and surrendered to the Father. This is the problem. This is the problem that we are having. It's not from a flesh that, you see, the coals of fire had to come from the brazen altar. And that coals of fire that's coming from a brazen altar has to come from an altar where people are submitted and surrendered to the Father completely. And if they are not submitted and surrendered to the Father completely, they are going to offer Him strange fire. That's what they're doing. They're not offering Him a fire that is from a heart that is in complete surrender to the Father. Flesh is still on a throne. And the problem is that self-appointed leaders whose flesh is still on the throne, that's why it takes a long time before the Father finally raises up a leader. Because a leader has to learn to be submitted and surrendered to the Father completely, where their flesh is not on the throne. And this is the problem. As long as flesh is still on the throne, we will still be children, tossed by every wind of doctrine, because we've got to learn to be submitted and surrendered to the Father. So you see, for you to be able to go and offer incense on an altar, for you to offer that incense on an altar, your life is what you're going to offer on an incense altar, because you have to become the coal of fire. So you see, you got to be a burning coal of fire that needs to be offered on a brazen altar. A coal of fire on that brazen altar is what is taken out and put on an incense altar to become a sweet-smelling aroma to the Father. So your submitted, surrendered life to the Father becomes that incense that's being offered to the Father. That is not where flesh is on the throne. That's not your works of your flesh. That's not a religious offering. That is your life submitted and surrendered to the Father. That is when your life is in line with Him. It's not your works. It's then when your life is surrendered and submitted that He's the one who gets you to do the good works that He has for you to do. Not where you're doing the good works to impress Him. John 12. Let's go to John chapter 12. And we will see this in John 12. From verse 24 to 27, and it says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He who loves his life shall lose it." So you see, the one who truly loves his life is going to lose it. "And the one who hates his life in this world shall preserve it for everlasting life. If anyone serves me, let him follow me, and where I am, there my servant also shall be. If anyone serves me, the Father shall value him. Now I myself am troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this reason I came to this hour." So do you understand, unless a kernel of wheat dies and falls to the ground, it cannot produce a harvest. You cannot bring the harvest into the kingdom until you yourself are a kernel of wheat that has had to fall to the ground and die. And that's why you cannot raise yourself up prematurely. And that's why the Father will equip you and train you. And that's why you come under leadership that is there for the Father to equip you and train you before you become that kernel of wheat yourself that is going to then have to die. And then you can produce a harvest for the Father. But unless that kernel of wheat has fallen to the ground and dies, it cannot produce a harvest for the Father. That's why he couldn't accept that offering of the brazen that was coming of the fire. They were not ordained to do that. That was not their job. And they should have already learned from what happened to Abihu and Nadab, that they offered strange fire to the Father and they died. But you see, their rebellion did not learn anything. They didn't learn anything from their rebellion. And that is why we pick up with our story. And then we see, did the Israelites learn from the rebellion? And that's why I'm saying, that's why it's so important that we learn these Torah portions, because from these Torah portions, these are examples for us to learn from, so that we do not make the same mistakes. And let's listen to what it says. So we finished in verse 40. Now let's look from verse 41. But all the congregation of the children of Israel grumbled against Moshe and against Aaron, their leaders. Now they are grumbling against their leaders. So instead of them just learning from what has happened when Korach, Dathan, did they learn from their grumbling? Did they learn? No, they did not learn from what happened to Nadab and Abihu. Now, here is the whole house of Israel grumbling against Moshe and against Aaron on the next day, saying, you have killed the people of Yahuwah. And it came to be, when the congregation assembled against Moshe and against Aaron, they turned towards the tent of appointment, and see, the cloud covered it, and the steam of Yahuwah appeared. And Moshe and Aaron came before the tent of appointment, and Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, arise from amidst this congregation, and let me consume them in a moment. And they fell on their faces once again. Moshe, humble man of Yahuwah, has to fall on his face because he knows destruction is going to come against the camp now because of their griping, moaning, and complaining. You see, if the Father doesn't have those who truly intercede, then the Father will destroy. The Father doesn't destroy because of intercession prayer. Because if it wasn't for the intercession prayer, the Father would surely destroy. If Moshe did not intercede on behalf of the children of Israel when they went and built a golden calf, he was going to destroy them all. Now, Moshe falls on his face again. They fell on their faces. So Moshe said to Aaron, take the fire holder and put fire in it from the slaughter place and lay incense on, and go, hurry to the congregation and make atonement for them, for the wrath has gone out from Yahuwah. The plague has begun. So you see, the plague is going to hit, and those who are rebellious against the Father are going to die in the plague. And Aaron took it as Moshe commanded, and ran into the midst of the assembly, and saw that the plague had begun amongst the people. And he laid on the incense and made atonement for the people, and stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. Those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died on account of Korach. Then Aaron returned to Moshe at the door of the tent of appointment, for the plague had stopped. So you see, the only reason why the Father is not bringing the destruction, see, he speaks to his intercessors when destruction is going to come. And so many times the Father is speaking and saying, I'm going to bring destruction. And He's spoken the destruction. But you see, that's why the Father has intercessors. And that's why many times prophets are looked to be false prophets, because they speak a thing and then it doesn't happen. But in the meantime, they are interceding and crying out to the Father for mercy. And they're weeping on behalf of the people that the Father is wanting to destroy. But there's going to come a day when the Father says, enough is enough. And that's why they never entered into the promised land. He never destroyed them, allowed them to wandering in the land of the wilderness, and never allowed them to enter into the promised land. And so, in chapter 17, we see now how Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel and take from them a rod from each father's house, all their leaders according to their father's houses, 12 rods, write each one's name on his rod, and write Aaron's name on the rod of Levi, for there is one rod for the head of each father's house. And you shall then place them in the tent of appointment before the witness, where I meet with you. And it shall be that the rod of the man whom I choose buds, and shall rid him myself of the grumblings of the children of Israel, which they grumble against you. And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, and all their leaders gave him a rod, each leader according to their father's house, 12 rods, and the rod of Aaron was among their rods. So Moshe placed the rods before Yahuwah in the tent of witness, and it came to be on the next day that Moshe went into the tent of witness and saw that the rod of Aaron of the house of Levi had budded and brought forth buds, blossoms, and bore ripe almonds. And Moshe brought out all the rods before Yahuwah to the children of Israel, and they looked, and each man took his rod. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, bring Aaron's rod back before the witness, to be kept as a sign against the rebels, so that you put an end to their grumblings against me, lest they die. And so that is why Aaron's rod went into the Ark of the Covenant, in order to be able to be as an atonement for their sins, as for them to know that Father had chosen Aaron and Moshe to lead the people. But even when the people can see the signs, and they see how the Father uses the leader that He's chosen, yet they will not submit, because we see more rebellion that starts to happen. And so in Numbers chapter 18, from verses 6, and it says, and see, I myself have taken your brothers, the Levites, from the midst of the children of Israel, a gift to you, given to Yahuwah, to do the service of the tent of appointment. So He's got His Levites that He raises up as service to Him in His kingdom. But you and your sons with you are to guard your priesthood for all matters at the slaughter place and beyond the veil and behind the veil, and you shall serve. I have given you the priesthood as a gift for service, but the stranger who comes near is put to death. So the Father is the one who will raise up His priesthood. He raises up His priesthood. And so if we look at Hebrews chapter 5, Hebrews chapter 5 says, for every priest taken from among men is appointed on behalf of men in matters relating to Eloah. So he is going to, every priest taken from among men, he chooses his priesthood. He's choosing his priesthood on behalf of men in matters relating to Eloah, to offer both gifts and offerings for sins, being able to have a measure of feeling for those not knowing and being led astray, since he himself is also surrounded by weakness. And on account of this, He has to offer for sins as for the people, also for himself. So he knows his sinful ways. He stands on behalf of man and on behalf of himself. And no one obtains this esteem for himself, but he who is called by Eloah, even as Aaron was called. So, Father will raise up his priesthood. He knows who they are. And so also Messiah did not extol himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him, "You are my son. Today I brought you forth." As he also said in another place, "You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and petitions with strong crying and tears to him, who was able to save him from death and was heard because of his fervent fear." So you see, a priest stands in the gap with much tears. Though being a son, he learned obedience by what he suffered. And having been perfected, he became the causer of everlasting deliverance to all those obeying him. And this is what the Father is doing. Having been perfected, he became a causer of everlasting deliverance to all those obeying him. So, how does an intercessor stand in the gap? Stands in the gap because they too understand what it means to go through much difficulties. Therefore, they too stand in the gap. Now let's go look at our Haftorah, 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 11. We see that the spirit that, Shaul was chosen from among men because the people wanted a leader. And the spirit of Eloah came upon Shaul mightily as he heard these words, and his displeasure burnt greatly. And he took a yoke of cattle and cut them in pieces and sent them throughout all the border of Israel by the hand of the messenger, saying, "Whoever does not go out with Shaul and Shemuel to battle, let this be done to the cattle." And the fear of Yahuwah fell on the people, and they came out as one man. We cry out to Abba, and he sends a leader and a deliverer, but then the people stand against the leader that Abba chooses, just as they did against Moses and Aaron. So we've got to understand, Father is the one. He hears the cries of the people, and then he sends them a deliverer. He sends them a leader to help the people to come out of destruction. But then the people fight the leader that the Father sends. So when the Father raises up a leader, he sends that leader into an area where the people need deliverance, and the leader has been sent there to help the people be delivered out of the destruction that they find themselves in. 1 Samuel 12:12-15, and it says, "And when you saw that Nahash, sovereign of the children of Ammon, came against you, you said to me, 'No, but let a sovereign reign over us,' when Yahuwah your Eloah was your sovereign." You see, they wanted a sovereign just like the nations. And now here is the sovereign whom you have chosen and whom you have asked, and see, Yahuwah has set a sovereign over you. So we have to understand that, you see, in verse 6, 12, verse 6, Shemuel, I was reading from verse 11, from chapter 11, sorry. Shemuel said to the people, "It is Yahuwah who appointed Moshe and Aaron, and who brought your fathers up from the land of Mitzrayim. And now stand still so that I judge you before Yahuwah concerning all the righteous acts of Yahuwah, which he did to you and your fathers. When Yaakov had come to Mitzrayim, and your fathers cried out to Yahuwah, then Yahuwah sent Moshe and Aaron, who brought your fathers out of Mitzrayim, and made them dwell in this place. But they forgot Yahuwah their Eloah, so he sold them into the land of Sisera, commander of the army of Hatzor, and into the hand of the Philistines, into the hand of the sovereign of Moab, and they fought against them. And they cried out to Yahuwah and said, 'We have sinned because we have forsaken Yahuwah and served the Baals and the Asheroth, and now deliver us from the hand of our enemies, and we serve you.'" So you see, the Father raises up a leader to be able to lead the people out of the destruction of the enemy. But then what do the people do? They come up against the very leaders that the Father raises to be able to bring deliverance to the people, because the Father knows the leader whom he raises up. And so this is what he now says. He's going to raise up a sovereign. And now here is the sovereign whom you have chosen and whom you have asked. And see, Yahuwah has set a sovereign over you. If you fear Yahuwah and shall serve him and obey his voice and not rebel against the command of Yahuwah, when both you and the sovereign who reigns over you shall follow Yahuwah your Lord. But if you do not obey the voice of Yahuwah and shall rebel against the mouth of Yahuwah, then the hand of Yahuwah shall be against you, and it shall be against your fathers. And so here we see a leader. What must a leader do? A leader does what the will of the Father is, and whatever the leader does will affect the people, if they will follow Yahuwah or not. What the leader does, if the leader is going to follow Yahuwah and submit to Yahuwah, then the people are going to follow Yahuwah and submit to Yahuwah. So what the leader does is going to make the difference between whether the people are going to follow Yahuwah or not. In 1 Samuel 12, verses 23 to 25, it says, And also, as for me, far be it from me, that I should sin against Yahuwah in ceasing to pray for you, but I shall teach you the good and the straight way. Only fear Yahuwah, and you shall serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider what marvels he has done for you. But if you persist in doing evil, both you and your sovereign are consumed. This is what a true leader should teach the people, to fear Yahuwah and to serve him in truth with all your heart, and to consider the marvels that Yahuwah has done. This is what the Father wants. But if they don't do that, then if they persist in doing evil, then both the leader and the people will be destroyed. And so we finish off with Hebrews chapter 13 for us to see that the Father does raise up his leaders. And in verse 7, 13 verse 7, and it says, Yahuwah answered and said, You do not know what I am doing now, but you shall know after this. Oh, sorry, I'm in John. Hebrews 13, chapter 7, and it says, Remember those leading you, who spoke the word of the Lord to you. Consider the outcome of their behavior and imitate their belief. Yahuwah Messiah is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Do not be borne about by various strange teachings, for it is good for the heart to be established by favor, not with foods which have not profited those who have been occupied with them. So understand, the leader themselves that lead the people themselves need to be leaders that follow Yahuwah and his ways. And then verses 17, it says, so we finish with this, Obey those leading you and be subject to them, for they watch over your lives as having to give an account. So understand, it is not an easy thing to be a leader, because the Father is going to require an account from the people that they are leading. Let them do so with joy and not groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. Pray for us, for we trust that we have a good conscience, desiring to behave well in every way. So pray for your leaders, because they are the ones that stand accountable before the Father. But I particularly encourage you to do this, that I might be restored to you with sooner, and a law of peace be brought up our Master Yahushua from the dead, that brought up our Master Yahushua from the dead, that great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant, make you perfect in every good work, to do his desire, working in you what is pleasing in his sight. Through Yahushua Messiah, to whom be esteemed forever and ever. Amen. Praise Abba Yahuwah. May that be our prayer. that be my prayer. That this is my prayer for you as we close off this Torah portion. That Eluah of peace, who brought up our Master Yahushua from the dead, that great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant, make you perfect in every good work, to do His desire, working in you what is pleasing in His sight, through Yahushua Messiah, to whom be esteemed forever and ever. Amen. Praise you, Abba Yahuwah. Amen.